The following summer, in 1986, my family returned to Indiana over the July 4th holiday for a couple of weeks. Dad was in a temperamental mood on that trip because he had quit smoking a few months earlier at the behest of my mother. I, too, was in a foul mood during the first week of that trip because my family stayed in a rented RV at a local campground called Jellystone National Park. My mom's sister Jo worked at the campground, and a lot of my cousins were staying there for Carrie, Cammie, and I to play with. But I hated that campground. It was hot, uncomfortable, and full of mosquitoes. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, I never really got along well with my cousins on my mother's side of the family. So I complained incessantly about wanting to leave Jellystone to go see Grandpa at the farm. After a few days at the campground, I caught a lucky break when my mom came down with a terrible flu, while my dad had to fly away on a short business trip. Because Mom was sick, Grandpa drove down to take Dad to the airport. When I saw Grandpa at the campground, I begged my mom to let me go back to the farm with him for the remainder of the vacation, and she happily agreed. She was just too sick to put up with me any longer and wanted me out of her hair. When Grandpa and I dropped Dad off at the airport, I remember Dad kissing me on the cheek and putting his hand on my shoulder before saying, "You be good and take care of Grandpa while I'm gone, okay? I'll be back in a few days." I said I would, of course, and after Dad boarded his flight, Grandpa and I drove back to the farm together. That night, I was very happy not to be at the campground. Even though it was still brutally hot in the farmhouse, I was right where I wanted to be, lying on the couch in the living room with Grandpa in his recliner, watching an episode of Hogan's Heroes together. We weren't the only ones in the house that night, though. My dad's older sister, Linda, and her youngest son, Kelly, were living with Grandpa during this time, and Aunt Linda was in her room sleeping because she worked odd hours as a nurse, and Kelly, who was in high school, was out with friends. By the time I started to doze off to sleep that night, Grandpa had taken out his hearing aid and was sitting on the floor directly in front of the TV so that he could hear. What happened next was without a doubt the single most important moment of my life.